Eleanor, or Ellie as she preferred in thoughts she rarely voiced, traced the outline of a forgotten dream. It wasn't a photograph she found, tucked away in an old manual, but something far more personal, a faded, leather-bound sketchbook, its pages filled with intricate drawings of fantastical creatures and impossible landscapes she'd meticulously rendered in her late teens. She'd stumbled upon it while clearing out the attic, a task undertaken more out of a sense of restless boredom than a need for order, a space as dusty and neglected as the passions it had once housed. Years! It had been years, a full decade, since she'd allowed herself to even think about drawing with serious intent, let alone pick up a pencil with that kind of focused, joyful abandon. The creatures on the page seemed to pulse with a vibrant, untamed life she no longer recognized in herself. They were wild, imaginative, a little dangerous, imbued with a fierce independence, everything her current, carefully curated, and utterly predictable existence was not. Her life with Mark, her husband of 12 years, was comfortable. There was no denying that. He was a good man, steady and reliable, a successful architect who built solid, sensible structures, much like the meticulously planned life they shared. Their routines were smooth, almost frictionless, their home immaculate and tastefully decorated, their affection a quiet, well-worn habit, like a favorite old sweater, comforting but no longer thrilling. There was nothing overtly, dramatically wrong. And that, Ellie was beginning to realize, with a terrifying, suffocating clarity, was precisely the problem. The absence of sharp edges also meant the absence of exhilarating peaks. Mark found her in the dusty attic, a smudge of gray on her cheek, the forgotten sketchbook open on her lap, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on her skin. He was on his way to his regular Saturday morning golf game, perfectly attired in pressed chinos and a polo shirt, a stainless steel thermos of freshly brewed coffee in hand. He glanced at the intricate drawings, a flicker of surprised recognition in his eyes. "Wow, I haven't seen these in ages, Elle." "You were always so incredibly talented with that sort of thing." He smiled, that familiar, almost reflexive blend of genuine fondness and an underlying practicality that always seemed to gently, unintentionally dismiss her more whimsical, less quantifiable pursuits. "It's a shame you never really had the time to keep it up. But then again," he added, already turning towards the attic stairs, his mind clearly on his tea time. "Life happens, doesn't it? Responsibilities take over. Dinner with the Hendersons at 7 tonight. Don't forget, okay?" Then he was gone, his footsteps receding down the stairs, the conversation, like the rediscovered sketchbook and the passions it represented, relegated once more to a forgotten past. Ellie sat there for a long time, much longer than she meant to, the musty scent of old paper and dried graphite filling her senses, staring at the fierce, joyful abandon captured in her youthful art. Where had that girl gone? The one who believed, with an unshakable conviction, that she could conjure entire worlds with a pencil and a dream, who yearned to illustrate epic fantasies and breathe life into mythical beasts? She had, Ellie realized with a pang of profound regret, traded her for sensible choices, for a predictable future, for the layered responsibilities of managing a home and supporting a husband's career. She had exchanged her vibrant, messy, unpredictable inner world for late dinners, often eaten in strained silence after Mark worked late, for polite, almost perfunctory kisses on the forehead before sleep claimed them in their separate, unbridgeable drifts across the wide expanse of their king-sized bed. The insistent hum of the forgotten life captured in those aged pages gnawed at her soul. Joy, yes, she had moments of it, fleeting and carefully rationed. Purpose? She managed their home with quiet efficiency, supported Mark's ambitious career, volunteered dutifully at the local library twice a week. But true, unadulterated sensuality. Exhilarating freedom? Those felt like words from a foreign language she'd once spoken fluently, passionately, but had long since forgotten. The vocabulary lost to years of disuse and quiet resignation. That feeling of stumbling upon a forgotten part of yourself, a lost passion that once defined you, can be incredibly powerful and deeply unsettling, can't it? It's like finding a hidden locked room in a house you thought you knew completely. Have you ever rediscovered a dream or a talent you once set aside for the so-called practicalities of life? What did that moment of rediscovery feel like? And did it spark a desire, however small or terrifying, for significant change in your life? Share your own experiences of these profound awakenings in the comments below. These moments are so vital to understanding our own unique journeys. And if you're intrigued by Ellie's dawning awareness and her quest for something more, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because her story is just beginning to unfold in unexpected ways. A few days later, spurred by a deep, unshakable restlessness she could no longer ignore or rationalize away, Ellie found herself online, researching intensive art workshops. One, in a small, artsy, slightly bohemian town a few hours up the coast, caught her eye. It focused on unleashing inner creativity. With a surge of uncharacteristic impulsiveness, she enrolled. She told Mark it was a personal development and stress management retreat, a phrase vague enough, clinical enough, to avoid too many probing questions or his gentle skepticism. He'd simply nodded, already engrossed in the blueprints for a new, prestigious office complex he was designing. Sounds nice, Elle. Very sensible. Enjoy the break. You probably need it. His easy, almost indifferent dismissal, though not intentionally unkind, further solidified the quiet, persistent ache in her chest, the ache of being unseen, ununderstood. The workshop was held in a rambling, charmingly dilapidated old Victorian house that had been lovingly converted into a series of bright, airy art studios, sunlight streaming generously through large, paint-splattered bay windows. It smelled wonderfully of turpentine, damp clay, fresh coffee, and overwhelming, exhilarating possibility. Ellie, armed with a set of new, high-quality pencils, a pristine, intimidatingly blank sketchbook, and a heart full of a nervous, fluttering admixture of profound fear and tentative exhilaration, felt like an explorer on the verge of an unknown continent. She was surrounded by people of all ages, from all walks of life, all radiating a vibrant, almost tangible creative energy that was both incredibly intoxicating and deeply daunting to her own fragile, reawakening artistic spirit. Their instructor was Julian Vance, a renowned, almost legendary illustrator with a wild, untamed mane of dark, silver-streaked hair, perpetually paint-stained fingers, and piercing, intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense and into the very core of one's being. His own art, displayed in several prominent galleries, was a mesmerizing, often unsettling blend of the fantastical and the deeply, sometimes painfully, emotional, the very things Ellie had once aspired to capture in her own work. His teaching style was unconventional, almost Socratic, pushing them constantly to abandon their reliance on mere precision and rote technique, and instead to embrace the messy, unpredictable, and often terrifying beauty of imperfection, to find and trust their own authentic, unique voice, rather than just mastering established methods. "Don't just draw what you see with your eyes," Julian urged them passionately on the first day, his voice a captivating baritone that filled the high-ceilinged studio. "Draw what you feel in your gut. Draw the hidden story behind what you see. Your fear, your unspoken joy, your secret, burning longing, put it all onto the page, raw and unfiltered. That's where the real magic happens, my friends. That's where true art is born. Ellie struggled immensely in those first few days. Years of suppressing her creative impulses, of prioritizing practicality over passion, had left her artistic muscles severely atrophied, her creative well almost dry. Her lines were hesitant, timid, her compositions stiff and lifeless. She felt like a complete imposter, a sensible middle-aged wife merely playing at being an artist amongst truly gifted individuals. Other students, bold and seemingly fearless in their expression, filled their pages with confident, sweeping strokes, with vibrant colors, with raw emotion. Ellie mostly erased, her frustration mounting with each failed attempt to connect with that lost part of herself. During a much-needed coffee break on the third day, Julian found her staring disconsolately at a particularly overworked, muddy, and altogether depressing drawing of a twisted, gnarled tree that looked as if it were in its death throes. "That ancient tree looks nearly as tortured as you do right now, Eleanor," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, though his keen, analytical gaze missed nothing. He always called her Eleanor, a formality that, paradoxically, felt more respectful, more acknowledging of her as an individual, than Mark's affectionate but often dismissive, almost childish diminutive L. I can't seem to find it," she stammered, her cheeks burning with embarrassment under his scrutiny. "The feeling, the story, it's just gone." "Perhaps, Eleanor," Julian said, leaning closer, his scent a curious, not unpleasant mix of oil paints, strong coffee, and something uniquely, indefinably him. "You're trying too hard to control it, to force it into a preconceived notion of what it should be. True art, true creation, isn't about control. It's about surrender. It's about listening. What does this tree want to be? What secrets does it hold?" He didn't offer technical advice on shading or perspective. He offered her a completely different way of seeing, of connecting. That afternoon, Ellie stopped trying to draw a perfect, botanically accurate tree. Instead, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to feel its ancient, gnarled strength, its resilience against countless storms and changing seasons, the silent, myriad stories held within its rings, its bark, its very essence. When she opened her eyes and began to draw again, something crucial shifted within her. The lines flowed more freely, more intuitively. The shadows held a new, unexpected depth. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the academic imagination, but it was alive. It was hers. And for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of something that resembled joy. Over the course of that transformative week, under Julian's insightful, often challenging, but always supportive guidance, something profound began to awaken in Ellie, something she had thought long dead and buried. He pushed her, relentlessly but kindly, to dig deeper into her own emotional landscape, to confront her fears of imperfection and judgment, to embrace the messy, unpredictable, and often exhilarating nature of true creativity. They had long, meandering conversations during breaks or after the official workshop hours, not just about art techniques, but about life, about the courage it takes to pursue passion, about the vital importance of living authentically in a world that often demands conformity and celebrates superficiality. Julian, Ellie learned, had also come from a conventional background that expected a more sensible career path. But he had fought, fiercely and at great personal cost sometimes, for his art. A choice that hadn't always been easy, but had been, he said with a quiet conviction, absolutely essential for the survival of his soul. Ellie found herself opening up to him, sharing her thoughts and feelings in ways she hadn't with anyone in years, certainly not with Mark, whose well-meaning practicality often felt like a gentle but firm dismissal of her inner world. She spoke of her abandoned dreams of illustration, her quiet but persistent frustrations with her current life, the gnawing, ever-present sense that she was living a life that, while comfortable and socially acceptable, wasn't truly, authentically her own. Julian listened, not with pity or easy platitudes, but with a profound, empathetic understanding that made her feel seen, truly seen, and validated, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. There was an undeniable, almost tangible current that flowed between them, an intellectual and emotional spark that was as exhilarating as it was profoundly unsettling for Ellie. It wasn't overtly romantic, not yet, not in any conventional sense, but it was charged with a shared intensity, a powerful recognition of kindred spirits, of two souls who understood the often lonely path of creative seeking. He saw the artist in her, the vibrant, passionate woman she had tried so hard, for so long, to bury beneath layers of sensibility and duty, and his unwavering belief in that dormant part of her was like life-giving water on parched, barren earth. One evening, towards the end of the workshop, after a particularly intense and emotionally draining session, where Julian had them drawing blindfolded to bypass their critical minds and tap into their deeper intuition, he found Ellie alone in the main studio, staring out at the vast, moonlit ocean visible from the large bay window. "You have such a powerful, unique voice, Eleanor," he said softly, his voice startling her as he came to stand beside her, respecting her personal space, but his presence undeniably potent. "A truly singular vision. Don't ever let it stay silent again. The world needs to see what you create." "I'm scared, Julian," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, the admission raw and vulnerable in the quiet, moon-drenched room. "Scared of what it all means if I truly let it out. Scared of disrupting everything, everyone, in my carefully constructed life." "The only thing truly worth disrupting, Eleanor," he said, his gaze meeting hers in the dim light, his eyes holding an extraordinary depth of understanding, "is a life that is being half-lived. Authenticity is always a disruption to the comfortable status quo. But it's the only disruption genuinely worth making, the only one that ultimately leads to peace." His hand briefly, almost accidentally, brushed against hers as they stood side by the window, a fleeting, feather-light touch, yet it sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity through her, an awareness so potent, so unexpected, it left her breathless and trembling slightly. He pulled his hand away almost immediately, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps surprise at his own action in his eyes. But the charged moment hung in the air between them, vibrant, undeniable, and utterly transformative. When Ellie returned home at the end of that week, she felt like a different person, fundamentally altered. The world looked brighter, more vivid, her senses sharper, more attuned to the beauty and the pain around her. The attic sketchbook no longer felt like a melancholic relic of a lost past, but a vibrant, exciting promise of a possible, attainable future. Mark greeted her with a distracted kiss on the cheek and asked if her little spa week had been relaxing and if she felt recharged. She simply smiled, a genuine, enigmatic smile, and said it had been truly transformative. He nodded, already turning his attention back to his phone, to the latest stock market updates, completely missing the profound, life-altering truth held within her carefully chosen words. Ellie set up a small, dedicated studio space for herself in the spare room, a room she had previously allowed to become a repository for Mark's old, unused golf clubs and boxes of forgotten financial files. She began to draw again, every single day, not with the crushing pressure of trying to create a masterpiece, but for the sheer, unadulterated joy of it, for the incredible, liberating feeling of her soul finally, fully coming alive. Her art was changing, evolving rapidly, becoming bolder, more expressive, more honest, filled with the complex, powerful emotions she had suppressed for so many years. She thought of Julian often, his challenging words, his insightful guidance, his unwavering belief in her. They hadn't exchanged personal numbers, hadn't made any definite plans to stay in touch beyond a polite, professional, "I sincerely hope to see your work out there in the world someday, Elena." Yet his presence lingered powerfully in her thoughts, an encouraging, inspiring voice in her head, a constant reminder of the artist she was painstakingly, joyfully rediscovering within herself, the artist she was finally allowing herself to become. Rediscovering a lost part of yourself, especially a deeply ingrained creative passion, can be an incredibly powerful and sometimes profoundly unsettling experience. It can make you question the very foundations of the life you've carefully built. Have you ever had an experience, perhaps a workshop, a significant trip, or meeting a particular person that acted as a powerful catalyst for a major personal awakening or a shift in your life's direction? What did that awakening feel like? And what were some of the first changes, big or small, that it inspired in your life? Share your transformative stories and valuable insights in the comments. Your journey could very well inspire someone else to take their own courageous leap of faith. And if you're invested in Ellie's challenging but exhilarating path of self-discovery and artistic re-emergence, a thumbs up would be so deeply appreciated. The changes in Ellie were subtle at first, almost imperceptible to an unobservant eye, but Mark, in his own pragmatic, somewhat detached way, began to notice. She was quieter, more introspective during their predictable weekend social engagements with other couples, her contributions to conversations less about neighborhood gossip or home renovations and more, when she spoke at all, about ideas, about art, about things that seemed to make their friends exchange slightly bewildered glances. She spent countless hours locked away in her new studio, often emerging with charcoal smudges on her fingers and a distant, intensely focused look in her eyes that he found hard to penetrate. She started declining invitations to certain corporate dinners or tedious social events she once would have attended without question, simply out of duty, preferring the challenging but fulfilling company of her sketchbook and her own unfolding thoughts. "Are you okay, Elle?" he asked one evening, when she'd been particularly absorbed in a large, complex drawing for hours, barely registering his presence when he brought her a cup of tea. "You seem different lately. A bit far away, if you know what I mean." "I'm fine, Mark," she said, offering a small, distant, but not unkind smile.
"Actually, I'm much better than fine. I'm drawing again. Seriously drawing."
"Oh. That's nice," he said, a hint of genuine confusion, perhaps even a touch of something akin to concern in his voice. He didn't ask to see her work, a question she both longed for and dreaded. He didn't ask what had inspired this sudden, passionate resurgence of a long-dormant hobby. He simply accepted it seemed, as another of Ellie's quiet, harmless, and ultimately inconsequential eccentricities. And then he returned to his financial newspaper, the rustle of its pages a familiar dismissive sound. His lack of deeper curiosity, which once would have been a source of quiet, simmering resentment for Ellie, now felt almost like a strange kind of relief. It gave her space, precious, unjudged space, to explore this new, fragile, yet incredibly powerful part of herself without scrutiny, without unsolicited advice, without expectation. But it also, undeniably, highlighted the growing, silent chasm between them, the increasingly separate orbits their inner lives had begun to trace. Their shared path was diverging. One afternoon, months after the workshop, when the initial burst of creative rediscovery had settled into a more sustainable, disciplined practice, Ellie received an unexpected email. It was from Julian Vance. He was curating a small, selective group exhibition for emerging and re-emerging artists at a respected gallery in the city, and wanted to know if she would be interested in submitting a few pieces from her recent portfolio. Her heart leaped into her throat, pounding with a mixture of terror and elation. It was the professional encouragement, the external validation. She hadn't even realized she'd been so desperately craving. She spent the next few weeks in a veritable frenzy of creative energy, often working late into the night, pouring all her rediscovered passion, her deepest fears, her most fragile hopes, onto large canvases. Her work was raw, intensely emotional, sometimes unsettling, a stark and vibrant contrast to the polite, controlled, and often muted life she generally lived outside the sanctuary of her studio. When she finally packaged and submitted the pieces to Julian, she felt a terrifying sense of exposure, of having laid her very soul bare, but also a profound, exhilarating sense of accomplishment, regardless of the outcome. A week later, he called her. Not an email, but a call. "Eleanor," his voice was warm, genuinely enthusiastic over the line. "Your work, it's simply extraordinary, powerful, honest. We'd be incredibly honored to feature it prominently in the show." Tears streamed down Ellie's face as she listened. Silent, grateful tears. It wasn't just about the validation of being accepted into an exhibition. It was about being seen, truly seen, for the artist she was. The artist she was painstakingly, courageously becoming. The opening night of the exhibition was a vibrant, noisy blur of faces, voices, and art. Mark was there, of course, by her side, looking handsome in his well-tailored suit and vaguely, uncomfortably out of place amongst the more bohemian, eclectic art crowd. He told her several times that he was very proud of her achievement, shook a few hands with gallery patrons, then spent most of the evening talking about a new property development project with a fellow architect he'd unexpectedly run into. Ellie, however, felt a completely different kind of energy thrumming through her veins. She spoke with other artists, with strangers who connected deeply with her work, their insightful comments and heartfelt words of appreciation like life-giving rain on a parched, thirsty land. And then there was Julian. He didn't hover around her, didn't try to claim any reflected glory or credit for her re-emergence. He simply watched her from across the crowded room, a quiet, knowing, almost tender smile on his face, his eyes reflecting a pride that felt far more personal, far more deeply understanding than Mark's polite, somewhat dutiful approval. Later, as the crowd finally began to thin and the initial buzz of the opening subsided, they found themselves standing, as if by an unspoken agreement, before one of Ellie's largest, most challenging pieces, a dark, tumultuous, almost abstract landscape that nevertheless held a tiny, defiant, incandescent spark of light buried deep within its core. "This one," Julian said softly, his voice barely audible above the lingering gallery hum. "This one is you." isn't it, Eleanor? The storm, the struggle, and that fierce, unextinguishable light that refuses to be put out. Ellie nodded, unable to speak for a moment, a lump forming in her throat. He understood. He truly, profoundly understood. Not just her art, but her. He didn't touch her then. He didn't need to. The connection between them, forged in shared creativity and mutual respect, was a palpable, undeniable force, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared journeys, of kindred artistic souls recognizing each other across a crowded room. Walking away from the gallery that night, a new, unshakable sense of self firmly rooted within her, Ellie knew with absolute certainty that her life had irrevocably changed. The polite, carefully constructed facade of her comfortable existence with Mark, an existence that had once seemed like the only sensible option, suddenly felt unbearable, a beautifully furnished cage. The art she had reawakened within herself, the vibrant, authentic voice she was finally beginning to reclaim, demanded a life that was equally authentic, equally vibrant, equally true. The conversation with Mark, when it finally happened a few days later in the sterile quiet of their pristine living room, was quiet, deeply painful for both of them, but ultimately starkly inevitable. There were no raised voices, no dramatic accusations, no theatrical displays of anger or betrayal. Just the quiet, heartbreaking, mutual acknowledgement that they had grown into two very different people, wanting, needing, two very different lives. He was, in his own way, Ellie realized with a pang of sympathy, as trapped in their meticulously constructed routine as she had been. He was shocked, undeniably hurt, utterly bewildered by her decision. But somewhere deep down, beneath the layers of confusion and bruised pride, perhaps he, too, recognized the unspoken truth of their diverging paths. I need to find out who I am without this, Ellie had told him, her voice surprisingly steady, gesturing vaguely around their beautifully appointed, emotionally sterile living room, a room that suddenly felt like a stranger's house. Without us, as we are now, Mark, I need to find my own light again. The separation, when it came, was amicable, almost depressingly civilized. Mark, true to his nature, was practical, efficient, focused on the logistics. He moved out a few weeks later, leaving Ellie in the large, silent house that suddenly felt too expansive, too quiet, yet also, paradoxically, filled with a terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly liberating sense of possibility. She didn't immediately run to Julian, didn't seek solace or a new beginning in his arms. Her journey, she understood with a newfound clarity, wasn't about replacing one man, one life, with another. It was about rediscovering herself, about building a life on her own terms, a life where her art, her rekindled passion, had a central, unapologetic place. She threw herself into her work with a ferocious dedication, her small studio becoming her sanctuary, her truest, most authentic home. Months later, at another art opening, this time to her astonishment and quiet pride, her own small but well-received solo show in a little independent gallery, Julian was there, standing quietly at the back of the room, his eyes filled with that same unwavering, perceptive belief she had first seen during that transformative workshop week. After the last of the crowd had dispersed, after the final well-wisher had departed with promises to follow her burgeoning career, he walked over to her, a soft smile on his face. "You did it, Eleanor," he said, his voice filled with a quiet, genuine pride that warmed her to her core. "You found your voice. And it's truly magnificent." She smiled back, a genuine, confident smile that reached her eyes and radiated a newfound inner peace. "I had a good teacher," she said, her voice clear and steady, and a very good friend." He took her hand then, his touch no longer accidental or hesitant, but deliberate, warm, an unspoken invitation. "And now, Eleanor?" he asked softly, his gaze holding hers, a universe of possibility in his eyes. "What comes next for the magnificent artist?" Ellie looked at him, at this man who had seen her, truly seen her, when she had almost forgotten how to see herself. This man who had gently but firmly nudged her towards her own becoming. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with the unknown challenges and joys of a life being authentically lived. But for the very first time in what felt like a lifetime, she wasn't afraid. She was an artist. She was alive. And she was ready for whatever came next, ready to paint her own future, perhaps even hand in hand with someone who truly understood and cherished the unique, irreplaceable language of her soul. Her true life, the one she painted with bold strokes from the very depths of her heart, was, she knew with every fiber of her being, just beginning. Ellie's courageous journey is a powerful and moving reminder that it's never too late to rediscover a lost passion, to reignite a dormant spark within, or to seek a life that aligns more truthfully and vibrantly with who we are at our very core.
Sometimes the most seemingly comfortable or sensible life can be the one that slowly, almost imperceptibly, extinguishes our inner fire, and it takes immense courage to step away from the familiar, the predictable, and bravely embrace the often frightening unknown, all in the pursuit of reclaiming our most authentic selves. The unwavering support and insightful belief of someone who truly sees and understands our potential can often be the crucial catalyst for that profound transformation, helping us to find our own unique voice and to paint our own vibrant, meaningful futures. What does living an authentic life truly mean to you?
Have you ever had to make a difficult, life-altering choice to pursue a path that felt truer to your deepest self, even if it meant disrupting a comfortable, secure, or socially expected routine? Your personal stories of courage, resilience, and self-discovery are incredibly inspiring and valuable, so please share them in the comments below. Thank you for joining Ellie on her transformative journey of artistic and personal reawakening today. If her story of finding her true voice and embracing the courage to change resonated deeply with you, please show your support with a thumbs up. It means so much and helps others find these inspiring narratives. And of course, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and click that all-important notification bell so you won't miss out on more stories that celebrate the courage it takes to live authentically and the profound, life-changing connections that help us along that often challenging but ultimately rewarding way. Until next time, may you always have the courage to listen to the insistent whispers of your own heart and to paint your unique life with your own truest, most vibrant colors.